And is there any limit to this phenomenon? Pepys asked. Not that we're aware of. Then there would be no reason why you might not make that same voyage again and yet again, travel back into the past, however so often it pleased you, and acquire one Samuel Pepys after another. I think one of you is quite enough, she assured him with a laugh. Yet 'twould be possible, would it not? Yes, but. Ah, he sat back, so I perceived that even magic such as yours has limits. Indeed it does, she said, her tone much more somber. We thought nothing was changing when we traveled to the past. But it turned out our understanding of time travel was incomplete. We thought we could jump into our time machines, go back to something like the Great Library of Alexandria, and steal every book and scroll before they burned, all without any consequences. What a magnificent mission! His eyes glowed. Did you, in very fact, accomplish that? Rescue the Great Library? Oh, yes, that and so many more antiquities. And not just objects either. We thought we could tranquilize famous figures, drag their limp bodies into our ships, and set them up here in guest retention, all without changing the past at all. And you did that as well. The glow in his eyes darkened. Abduct those famous figures without will or let? Yes, she replied unflinchingly, and he swallowed. I had not realized, he said after a moment, slowly. The travelers from your time who brought me hither were far gentler than that. Indeed, their invitation was most polite. When it was possible, or seemed practical at least, Art preferred to ask, Theodora said, because, she added silently, subjects who came voluntarily and willingly were less likely to suffer psychotic episodes when they realized what had happened to them. But, you see, we thought every wrong we committed didn't count. That nothing we did in the past had any lasting impact. It was only real while we were there in the past, and then it wasn't as soon as we left. As I say, we'd proven that was the case by returning and observing that no change had occurred, despite our meddling. So none of the antiquities we rescued or historical figures we collected were really affected in any way. Your tone suggests to me that you have but lately discovered the fashion and degree to which your understanding was less than perfect? Oh, yes. Theodora nodded. It turns out there's a limit, a threshold where what we do in the past can cause the timeline to branch. Many of the things we've done don't rise to that level, and in those instances, the results of our actions truly do dissipate, the way the vibrations did after you plucked the cord, and leave no trace behind. And it's absolutely true that we didn't change our own past, which is why we found no lasting change when we revisited it. But our actions can spawn a new timeline. I fear I have lost the scent, Doctor. He looked at her apologetically. I believe I understand every word you said. It is the sum of their meaning that eludes me. Well, you're in good company. A lot of people seem to struggle with this. Here, you hold the rope. He nodded and took the rope from her, holding it extended between them, as she had. This is what happens when we go back to study the past and make as few changes as possible, Theodora said, and strung the rope gently. And when less care is taken? This, she held up the knife, is a more accurate analogy of what happens then. She placed the edge of the blade against the rope and stroked downward, and strands spiraled off the main cord. I am no savant, Pepys said, watching the strands unravel, no fellow of Lord Brounker's society. Yet to mine own untutored eye, that would seem to be no good thing. No, it isn't, she agreed. And the more you do of it, and the more closely together you do it, the worse it gets. Our blundering through the past almost destroyed all of reality. And we didn't care how many people we killed, slaughtered in our raids, because it wasn't real. None of them stayed dead. We thought what we were doing was safe and right and harmless. We thought... Her lips quivered and the words choked in her throat as she remembered the bodies, the blood, the stink of riven organs sprawled across the mosaic floors of the great library, the thunder of the Chronoport's Gatling guns slaughtering the city guard, the terror that had spread across the city as the demons descended upon them with clouds of destruction, with death and destruction and horror. The clouds of buzzing flies drawn to drying blood as she walked back and forth through the puddles to plunder the endless racks of scrolls. Somehow that was the most haunting memory of all, the flies. You discovered you were in error, he said softly. Yeah. She inhaled deeply, then nodded and laid the knife on the table. Yeah, we were in error, all right. We were wrong. So very, very wrong. In what way? Pepys asked, almost gently, and she looked at him. There's a reason I mentioned the great library, she said, her voice soft enough he had to strain to hear it. That's because I was the one who headed that expedition. It was a huge feather in my cap professionally. But now we know what really happened because one of our time machines went back to that moment to search for any child universe it might have spawned and found it. Found the universe I created, the universe in which flying demons ransacked the library, destroyed the heart of the city with their fireballs and lightning, and then just vanished again. The one that remembers me as the most horrible monster in their entire history. She broke off, closing her eyes and shaking her head. I suppose you could call that having been in error, she said after a moment, her voice bitter with self-loathing. And now 'tis I who have wronged you, Dr. Beckett, he said. My curiosity has brought you sorrow twice now. Pray accept my most humble apologies. It's all right. She raised one hand and coughed a laugh into it. We're the ones who bulldozed our way through history. You were just unlucky enough to be caught up in our mess. Pepys placed gentle fingers atop her other hand where it rested on the table. She glanced at him and saw genuine sympathy in his eyes. Her first reaction was to pull her hand away, but that concerned expression made her pause. And then, before she was even conscious of her decision, she turned her hand over and grasped his. So you truly can alter the past, he said in a wondering tone. In a sense, Theodora shrugged. We can't change our past, only other people's pasts. And we're still not sure of the parameters. There seems to be a threshold where changes are great enough to branch a child universe from our own. But we're not sure where that threshold lies, how big the change has to be. Yet from what you have thus far related, a truly large change in the past might well be made permanent, as I trust you will forgive me in the case of the mission you led to Alexandria. Only in the child universe that we created. Ours would be unaffected. Again, we can't change our own past. We can create new timelines, like the one I created in Alexandria. But we'd never be so foolish now that we know the dangers. I can, and do, accept your assurance that dangers exist, Dr. Beckett. Yet, as I have listened to your words, it occurs to me that the creation of this child universe of which you speak need not be so terrible a thing. What? She stiffened, and he shook his head quickly. Not all change need be evil, he said. Clearly, the evil consequences of your past actions, of your ignorance, grieve you sorely, and especially in the wake of your experience in Alexandria. Such grief is natural, inevitable for anyone of good will who believed her actions would wreak no harm in any way, only to find that they had wreaked harm on countless numbers. Yet suppose that one could voyage into the past, do something of vast significance, something wonderful that caused harm to none, only great good, that created one of these child universes you have described. A universe in which the change you had wrought knowingly was preserved, became a part of not simply its past, but of its future as well. She tilted her head, unsure where he was going with this. Doctor, I have seen at least a tithe of the wonders of which your world, this true present, is capable. He thumped his chest. I've felt its effects on my own health. Why hoard those wonders here in the present when they are so sorely needed in the past? You don't mean... I do, he declared as realization dawned in her eyes. Within your grasp lies the power to create worlds, entire universes in which history's greatest tragedies never happened. Universes which grow and mature, standing strong and straight, without the scars chance has inflicted upon our own. If guilt burdens your soul and spirit, then act. Voyage into the seas of the past. Seek out its shipwrecks and bear those lost voyagers to safety. Return to the past not to plunder its treasures, but to right its greatest wrongs. End of chapter. And so that's how Theodora meets Samuel Pepys and gets into trouble.